The neighborhood trap. A red laser dot swam across the wooden wall, the sharp crack of a suppressed gunshot. Jenna dove into the dirt, heart hammering against her ribs, and realized she was alone at the edge of everything she'd ever known. The hunters were closing in. But first, 3 days earlier, there was Mrs. Caldwell and a gift: soapy water. Warm. The white porcelain plate turned in Jenna's hands, suds running between her fingers, smooth, slick, ordinary. Through the kitchen window, the wooden slats of the backyard fence held her gaze steady. Furrowed brows, lips pressed thin. She stood rigid at the sink, the yellow sponge moving in circles that matched nothing. No rhythm, no purpose, just motion to keep the hands busy. The splash of running water filled the Saturday morning. Bright sun reflected off the soap bubbles, turning them iridescent. Jenna's jaw clenched. She'd been watching the fence for 10 minutes, maybe longer. Time had become a blurred thing lately. A hand appeared over the fence, liver spotted, adorned with a heavy gold signet ring, the kind that meant old money or old sin. Jenna could never tell which. Mrs. Martha Caldwell's hand, reaching over the weathered cedar like a crane's talon, offering something velvet and small to the boy on the other side. Leo, Jenna's son, 11 years old. Blue ink staining his fingers from homework. His shoulders slumped as he took the box, his eyes darting toward the kitchen window, toward her. Guilty. Caught. Then back to the old woman, who leaned closer to the fence, her mouth moving in a fast whisper that cut through the Saturday stillness like a razor through silk. Your mother doesn't want you to have a father, Leo. She's the one who drove him away. I'm the only one who can help you now. Jenna didn't hear the words. She read them on Caldwell's thin lips, each syllable a small puncture wound. The plate dropped. It didn't shatter, just hit the sink with a dull, heavy thud that seemed to echo through the whole kitchen. Suds splattered across the counter. Jenna's hands were white-knuckled as she gripped the floral dish towel, her knuckles turning from pink to bone white. What is she doing now? Jenna whispered to the empty room, though she knew exactly what was being done. Water droplets dispersed across the counter like shrapnel. She marched down the driveway. Her heels, black pumps, sharp and aggressive, clicked against the asphalt in rapid staccato bursts. Click, 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 a percussion of anger. Her long shadow stretched toward the street, and she intercepted Mrs. Caldwell at the edge of the property line before the old woman could retreat. Caldwell turned, her hands clutching a black leather handbag to her chest. She stared through Jenna, not at her, but through her, eyes wide and unblinking, playing the part of a fragile creature disturbed. But her posture was iron-rigid. The leather of the handbag creaked under the pressure of her grip. Sunlight glinted off the gold clasp like a tiny, cold eye. Stay away from my son, Martha. I mean it. Jenna's voice trembled with rage, low and controlled, which made it worse somehow. More dangerous. The old woman said nothing, just stared. That was when the white delivery van screamed around the corner, tires smoking as it fish-tailed toward the sidewalk. The world moved in slow motion and fast-forward simultaneously. Jenna dived toward Caldwell to pull her back, an instinct, maternal and automatic. But the old woman shoved her with unexpected, violent strength. Mrs. Caldwell's hands, those silver-haired hands that had seemed so frail moments before, were like iron. Jenna hit the grass hard. Her shoulder rolled over the edge of a brick flower bed, and the air left her lungs in a violent gasp. She lay there, palms scraped raw, the world spinning in bright fragments. When her vision cleared, Mrs. Caldwell was standing over her, not helping, her face a mask of cold triumph as the van stabilized and sped off down the street, leaving only blue smoke and tire marks. Breath came in ragged pulls. Jenna pushed herself up, palms stinging where the grass and brick had torn the skin. That was when she saw it. A small black plastic object, barely the size of a pack of gum, had fallen from Caldwell's pocket during the scuffle. A digital recorder. Sony. Professional grade. The red rec light was still flashing, still recording. That evening, Jenna knelt on the navy carpet of Leo's room. The plush blue bear, the one he'd had since he was 6, was turned roughly in her hands. Her fingers traced along the seams behind its neck, feeling for anything that didn't belong. Something cold and hard. She felt it catch on a stitch, pulled at the fabric. A tearing sound. White stuffing spilled out like guts. Her fingers closed around a cold, rectangular object buried deep in the polyester filling. She pulled it out. A small voice-activated recorder, identical to the one on the sidewalk. Identical. Her face went pale. Her lips parted in a silent gasp. She pressed the play button. The screen glowed. File 004.wave. She held the speaker to her ear, her body trembling, staticky hiss. Then Caldwell's voice, raspy, distorted through the small speaker. Your mother doesn't want you to have a father, Leo. She's the one who drove him away. I'm the only one who can help you now. Jenna's jaw twitched, a muscle spasming in her face. The same words from the fence, recorded, documented, weaponized. In the velvet box, she found a photograph. A Polaroid. It was a picture of Jenna's own mother, dead now, 3 years. But the face had been scratched out with a needle. Violent, deliberate scratches. The needle had pierced through the paper, leaving tiny holes where her mother's eyes used to be. The room tilted. Jenna's hand shook as she turned the photo over. On the back, in careful cursive, bloodline ends here. M. At 2 a.m., Jenna stood by the kitchen window, peering through the slats of the blinds. A dark figure moved across the patio, a flashlight beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. The figure was crouched, moving toward the shed. Jenna grabbed a heavy mag light from the counter, the emergency light they kept for storms, and ran. She burst through the back door. Her bare feet slapped against the cold wood of the deck as she launched herself toward the figure by the shed. The night air hit her like ice. Her breath came in white puffs. The figure turned, a man in a dark hoodie, and swung something at her head. A crowbar. Steel. Jenna dived to the side. The crowbar whistled inches above her hair, so close she felt the wind of it, and she tackled the man into the gravel driveway. They rolled on jagged stones. She swung the maglite. The heavy end connected with his forearm. She heard the crack before he did, a sickening snap of bone. And he kicked her off, his yelp of pain sharp and animal. He scrambled over the fence into Caldwell's yard, favoring his injured arm, and disappeared into the darkness. Jenna lay panting on the gravel, hands covered in dust and blood. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Then she saw it. A set of keys, dropped in the struggle, glinting in the moonlight. She picked them up with shaking hands. The keychain was a miniature replica of the Neighborhood Association logo. Hillsborough Heights, blue and gold enamel. She turned it over in her palm. The initials on the back read, R.H. Robert Henderson, the HOA president. Jenna's fingers flew across her laptop keys. The screen showed a local news article about Robert Henderson, HOA president, photographed at a community gala. In the background of the photo, just barely visible, stood Mrs. Caldwell. Not as a guest, as part of something, an organization, a partnership. Across the street, Mrs. Caldwell was sanding a window frame on her porch. She was wearing fine lace gloves while doing manual labor, an absurd, theatrical gesture. She looked up and waved, not friendly, slow, rhythmic, the wave of a stiff hand, a wave that said, I see you too. Jenna's stomach dropped. A folder appeared under her front door an hour later. Printed emails. She sat on the kitchen floor and read them, her hands shaking. Emails from her ex-husband to Robert Henderson. Emails describing her as unstable, paranoid, mentally unfit. Claims about incidents that never happened, behavior that she'd never displayed. A construction of lies so careful, so detailed, that she barely recognized herself in the portrait. Emails discussing Leo, discussing custody, discussing the necessity of removing her from the equation. She's not just watching us. She's dismantling us. Jenna whispered to the empty kitchen. Leo entered moments later, his eyes red from crying. His phone trembled in his hand. He showed her a text from his father. "I know everything, Leo. I'm coming to get you." Jenna pulled Leo close, but her eyes were on the window. Mrs. Caldwell's hand disappeared behind her curtains. But before it did, Jenna saw the silhouettes, dozens of them, in the window of the house across the street, the Smiths' front window, the Johnsons' kitchen. Every house on the block seemed to have a still, watching silhouette behind its glass. They were all looking, all of them watching Jenna's home. That evening, Jenna crawled through the thick dirt under the hydrangea bushes at the side of Caldwell's house. Her knees were caked in mud. The blue hydrangeas brushed against her face, and her eyes scanned the basement windows. The darkness under the house eaves was thick and suffocating. Her breath came shallow, controlled. One mistake and she was done. She found the window and peered through the glass. Inside, she saw a bank of monitors, 6 of them, maybe more. Each one glowed with a different view. Each one showed a different house. She recognized her own bedroom on the first screen, the playground where Leo played soccer on the second, the Smiths' kitchen on the third, an entire neighborhood, surveilled, documented, organized into a grid of rectangular screens, electronic humming from the window well below. The porch door above slammed open. Heavy footsteps thudded on the wood directly over Jenna's head. A cigarette butt was flicked down, landing inches from her hand, glowing red in the darkness. The butt hissed as it hit the damp soil. Jenna didn't move, didn't breathe. The footsteps retreated. She waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, breathing only through her nose. Then she retreated, belly crawling backward through the thorns. A thorn caught her cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. She didn't make a sound, but her teeth clamped onto her lips so hard she tasted copper. She reached the safety of her yard, but her back door was standing wide open. On the mat lay a single, dead bird. Its feathers ruffled in the draft. The bird was still warm. The community center was filled with faces. Hostile faces. Mrs. Caldwell sat in the front row, looking small and fragile. Mr. Henderson stood at the podium, a hand raised in some gesture of authority. Jenna stood at another podium, her hands gripping the wooden edges so hard the wood groaned under the pressure. She held up the digital recorder. "Martha Caldwell is recording your lives." Jenna's voice cut through the room. "She has cameras in your homes, CCTV equipment in her basement, pointed at every property on this block." The crowd stirred. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, interested. Mrs. Caldwell began to cry. A perfect, practiced sob. The kind that came from years of rehearsal. She leaned against Mr. Henderson, who put a protective arm around her thin shoulders. The gesture was theatrical, a performance designed for the audience, for the neighbors who were now turning their attention from Jenna to the fragile old woman. "She's lying," Henderson said into his own microphone. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man who had the room on his side. "Martha is a beloved member of this community. She's donated to the neighborhood school. She's volunteered her time. And now this woman comes here, making outrageous accusations. "I have the recordings," Jenna shouted. "I have proof." But the crowd was already against her. People stood up, fingers pointed, mouths opened in angry chorus. "Crazy," someone shouted. "Psycho," another voice called. "Leave her alone." A third person yelled, not in defense of Jenna, but in defense of Caldwell. The world was shrinking. The allies Jenna thought she had, the neighbors she'd smiled at over the fence, who she'd waved to at the mailbox, were all glaring at her now. All of them transformed into a single, hostile entity. Henderson walked to the podium and shoved Jenna aside with his shoulder. He took the microphone from her grip. Feedback screeched from the speakers, a sound like a creature in pain. Jenna stumbled off the stage. She felt the impact of his push in her ribs, a bruise already blooming. That was when she saw it. Mrs. Caldwell, still sitting in the front row, looking up from her handkerchief. For 1 second, just one, the old woman winked at her. A sharp, predatory gesture. A gesture that said, "I've already won." Jenna's legs carried her toward the exit. The crowd's noise faded behind her, replaced by the ringing in her own ears. The parking lot was empty. Rain had begun to fall, turning the asphalt black and slick. Jenna fumbled with her key fob, her fingers shaking. The Volvo's lights flashed. She was seconds away from the driver's seat when a shadow detached itself from a concrete pillar. Henderson grabbed her from behind, his arm wrapped around her neck in a chokehold. He slammed her against the car window, and Jenna's face was pressed into the cold glass. She gasped for air, but his grip tightened. The world began to tunnel. Black spots bloomed in her vision. She drove her heel into his instep. She heard the crunch of bone before the scream. While he was gasping in pain, she reached back, her fingernails gouging into his eyes. He howled and released her. She swung her heavy leather purse at his head. The buckle connected with his temple with a sharp crack. Henderson staggered backward. Jenna didn't get in the car. He was blocking the door, and he was already recovering, his face contorted with rage. She sprinted toward the tree line at the edge of the lot. His footsteps were heavy behind her, a rhythmic hammer strike on the pavement. Then grass. Then mud. She slid down a muddy embankment into a storm drain. Water rushed past her, cold, industrial, the smell of rust and minerals. She lay flat, barely breathing, as Henderson's boots stopped at the top of the slope. He was standing right above her. She heard his breathing, heavy, controlled, angry. She heard him scanning the darkness. Then his footsteps retreated. Jenna lay in the water for another hour, shivering before she moved. Inside the dark shed at the edge of the woods, Jenna used the light from her phone to examine a folded paper she'd grabbed from Henderson's pocket during the fight. An old birth certificate. The ink was faded, the paper yellowed. She swallowed hard and kept reading. Her phone contained a folder of photos, her own mother's funeral. She'd taken them years ago, moments the funeral director would have called disrespectful. She swiped through them, stopping on one image. A distant relative in the back, the face blocked by a veil. She zoomed in on the hands. The hands were holding a purse, and on the ring finger was a signet ring. The same ring, the same design, the same gold. The thunder rolled outside, rain pounding on the tin roof. Jenna's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. She opened a note app and typed, "Caldwell." Then she rearranged the letters, Caldwell. She typed it backward. Then she tried different combinations, her mind working in frantic circles. Then she found it. A note in Henderson's folder, handwritten in jagged script. Project Dayfall, target, bloodline destruction, operative, Meredith Vane, status, In progress. Meredith Vane, her mother's sister. The aunt who was supposed to have died in a car fire 20 years ago. The aunt whose funeral Jenna had attended as a child, had remembered as a closed casket and a conspiracy of silence. The aunt who had apparently been alive all these years, planning this, building it, layer by layer, year by year, until the trap was perfect. Vomit rose in Jenna's throat. She doubled over, and the phone fell from her hand. That was when she saw the red dot, a laser sight. It appeared on the wall of the shed, a tiny crimson point of light. Jenna didn't think. She just rolled to the side. The wall exploded where her head had been, wood splinters flying, the sharp crack of a suppressed gunshot barely audible above the rain. She looked at her phone. No signal, no bars, no way to call for help. She was alone at the edge of the neighborhood, and the hunters were closing in. Jenna picked up a piece of broken wood and moved to the door. She was going back. The basement window of Mrs. Caldwell's house. Jenna kicked the glass in. It shattered in a spray of crystalline destruction. She dropped into the darkness, landing on a pile of old newspapers. Her hands were bleeding, but she was gripping a shard of the broken glass. It was sharp enough to cut skin, sharp enough to be a weapon. The basement smelled of dust and electricity, old wood, decay. Mrs. Caldwell was sitting in the middle of the darkness in a rocking chair, waiting. She wasn't surprised. Her hands held a single red rose and a kitchen knife. The blade caught what little light seeped through the broken window, and it gleamed with a particular, oily shine. You always were the stubborn one, Jenna, just like your mother before I burned her. Caldwell's voice was conversational, almost fond. She kept trying to run too, kept thinking she could escape. Jenna saw the bank of monitors. They weren't just surveillance. They were connected to a central server. Cables running between machines, lights blinking in complex patterns. She realized in that moment that she could broadcast this. She could show the whole world what was hidden here. She lunged for the main control panel. Caldwell stood with surprising speed, swinging the kitchen knife. Jenna blocked the arm, and they crashed into the monitors. Screens shattered into sparks and cascading static. Glass cut both their hands. Caldwell screamed, an animal sound. But Jenna was stronger, younger, fueled by something older than rage. She pinned the old woman against the server, her forearm pressed against Caldwell's throat. Her free hand found the emergency broadcast button. Red, labeled in faded letters. Part of the HOA override system she'd seen Henderson use at the meeting. Jenna hit it. Outside, a neighborhood-wide siren began to blare. In every house, smart speakers and phones simultaneously blasted the voice from the recorder. Your mother doesn't want you to have a father, Leo. She's the one who drove him away. I'm the only one who can help you now. Then Caldwell's other words. Just like your mother before I burned her. People stepped out onto their porches in pajamas, looking at each other in shock. The sunrise was just beginning, that thin line of gold at the edge of the sky. The morning birds had gone silent. The only sound was the echo of Caldwell's voice repeating from dozens of houses simultaneously. Jenna walked out of the front door. She was battered, but her head was high. Behind her, police lights began to flicker against the white siding of the house. Red, blue, red, blue. The colors of authority arriving too late to prevent the disaster, just in time to collect the pieces. Leo ran across the yard, his pajamas flapping. He buried his face in Jenna's waist. She held him, her eyes finally softening. She looked at the signet ring she'd stripped from Meredith's finger, now in her palm. The gold was still warm from the old woman's hand. Mr. Henderson was being handcuffed by a police officer. He stared at the ground. His face was a map of shame. The rest of the neighborhood watch, the Smiths, the Johnsons, the Patels, dozens of them, were being led into police cars by officers in dark blue uniforms. Jenna looked up at the sky. The first ray of sun hit the "Welcome to Dayton" sign at the end of the block. A simple wooden sign. A simple lie. The surveillance was over. The watchers were being watched now, 3 months later. Jenna picked up a final moving box from the hardwood floor of the empty house. Underneath it, taped to the floor, was an envelope. It had her mother's handwriting on it. Jenna's heart stopped. She carefully peeled the tape away. Inside was a marriage certificate. Her marriage certificate? The one she thought she knew. But the signature for the witness line wasn't a stranger's name. It was Meredith Vane, written in a careful, deliberate hand. Jenna's ex-husband, the man she'd divorced, the man she'd spent 5 years trying to forget, wasn't a man she'd met by accident at a coffee shop. He was a plant, 15 years in the making, part of a network, part of the plan. She wasn't a divorcee trapped in a system built by one isolated psychopath. She was a victim of a decades-long conspiracy orchestrated by her own blood relative. And yet, she crumpled the marriage certificate. It fell into the trash can with a soft whisper of paper. She walked out the front door, slamming it shut with a violence that echoed through the empty house. The "For Sale" sign in the yard had a "Sold" sticker placed over it. She pressed the sticker hard, slap, with the satisfaction of finality. The car pulled away, gravel flying. The house stood empty behind her. The window where Caldwell used to watch now reflected only the open sky. Blue, clean, empty of all the eyes that had been turned toward it. Jenna didn't look in the rearview mirror. The car's engine hummed as it picked up speed, and the neighborhood of Dayton fell away behind her. A place with a name and a welcome sign that she would never see again. The road stretched ahead, empty, waiting. She drove.